There's been a lot of talk in the quilt world about pre-starching your fabric. And I have thought about it in the past, but I always had an excuse why I didn't want to do it and why I didn't even try. Some of my excuses were like, oh, I don't want to sew with paper or fabric that feels like paper, and that takes too much time. But you know what? I tried it with the fabrics on the quilt behind me, and I've decided to pre-starch my fabric. Now, there are several reasons why I'm going to pre-starch my fabric from now on, and I want to share those reasons with you. Now, when I say fabric, I'm not going to be pre-starching my pre-cuts because some shrinkage does occur with whenever you submerge your fabric in any type of liquid. So I don't want to be pre-starching those. So on those things I'll continue to use my best press, but on my other fabric, when possible, I'm going to pre-starch my fabric. Now stay tuned for the reasons. Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to The Simple Quilter. Today is a topic that I have been putting off addressing for a long time. However, I just recently tried pre-starching my fabric and now it's a game changer for me. So I want to share with you the reasons why I am going to pre-starch my fabric when I can. Now, pre-starching isn't for everybody, and please don't think that I'm telling you you have to pre-starch. I just want to share with you the reasons why I pre-starch, and you may or may not decide to pre-starch. But I do have to say, for years and years, I didn't, and I've known about it for years and years and years and years. I remember taking a course on it, I don't know, early in my quilting life experience, career, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, when I was a new quilter, and I took a class and we were to use stay flow starch and we were to put it in the bathtub with water, and we pre-starched all of our fabrics for this class. Well, the reason I think she had us pre-starching the fabric was because it had, I don't know, 49 pieces to one block. Needless to say, I didn't ever finish that quilt. I gave that quilt away, but we were pre-starching years and years ago. But now, you know, people are using the spray start to quilt, to pre-starch their fabric with, and that's what I tried for this quilt. And I have to say I loved it. So let's start with the reasons to pre-starch your fabric. Now the first 9 reasons all helped me to improve my piecing. Now, several quilters have talked about pre-shrinking the fabric, but I had to check it out for myself. So I'm going to show you what I did to check out to see how much it shrunk when you pre-starch your fabric. Okay, so the first thing I did, I took 2 pieces of fabric and I put them together and I cut them out simultaneously. And I cut out 5-inch squares. Now, the white fabric I did not pre-starch, but the red fabric I did pre-starch. And look how it shrunk. This was a 5-inch square, and look at how much that shrunk. So it really does pre-shrink your fabric because these were the same size. Now, it's important to note that the fabric only shrinks in one direction. Notice that this side is the same. It only shrinks with the crosswise grain, or cross from like selvage to selvage. From selvage to selvage, it shrinks within that distance. It doesn't shrink along the lengthwise grain. It shrinks again from selvage to selvage. So, for example, if you cut, say, a jelly roll strip from end to end, it's not going to shrink in the width. So you could actually starch those, but you're going to lose a little bit in the length. It'll still be 2.5 inches, but it will shrink in the length. So that's why you're only seeing that it shrunk on one side. But that convinced me that's pretty significant. And I even checked it twice. I did it twice because I thought, did I miscut that? Because I thought, well, that's quite a bit of shrinkage. I mean, that's more than 1/8 of an inch, and that could really affect your quilting. And so it does pre-shrink it. And I thought this was interesting because I've always had a difficult time with piecing a block when I use a pattern, because it always seems like my block is too small. And I think this is part of the reason, because I wasn't pre-starching, but I was certainly using a lot of best press and certainly using a lot of steam, and that alone could have been shrinking it too. So now with pre-starching, the shrinkage is already done. So the blocks on the quilt behind me, they just came out perfectly. It makes the fabric stiffer. And for me, it's easier to handle, especially the smaller pieces. I mean, you can see how much stiffer this one is than this one. You can just tell in the way that it drapes. And I really like that, because I found the fabric was a little bit easier to work with. Facilitated pressing. I mean, this fabric is just lays totally flat. This one, this is just limper. I mean, you know, it's just, it didn't press as nice. I didn't get as nice of a clean press as I did on this. This is crisp looking, and I really like the way it feels. Okay, so the next reason is that it's super easy to press open your seam. So I have starched these two fabrics and I've sewn them together. And I'm going to show you how easy these seams are to press open. Now, I've been one to not press seams open because it was such a struggle for me. But I want to show you how easy this is. Okay. I'm going to first just press it. I'm going to press the seam open here. Gives a beautiful flat press. Okay, so I want to show you how easy it is to press these seams open. And I did not press seams open before because this was just too much work. And I just struggled with it. Look how nice those seams are pressed open. I mean, it just is so nice, and it is so easy to press those open. I mean, I've struggled and struggled with trying to press seams open, and it was just really, really, really difficult to get those seams pressed open. Look how easy that is. I've really struggled with that. I don't know if you all have. Tell me in the comments below. Tell me if you've had a hard time pressing open seams, but I just really tried to avoid it at all costs. I didn't want to press the seams open, but because I'm working more with white fabrics, I am pressing seams open more. And let me tell you, pre-starching the fabric makes it a lot easier. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is that when these fabrics are stiffer, it really does make handling smaller pieces easier. I don't really have a way to demonstrate that for you, but I did want to mention that to you. And I did want to show you, I wanted to show you on these two how much nicer the seams pressed open look on this one than this one. It's definitely a nicer, flatter press. Another reason to starch your fabric is that cutting your fabric for me was more precise. Because the fabric was stiffer, it didn't seem to shift as much. My cuts were super clean, and I just felt like it gave me a more precise cut when I was cutting. Now, I also wanted to show you another point. I think another reason to pre-starch is to help reduce the stretching of the bias. When you cut a square diagonally, you end up with bias. And because this fabric's stiffer, I really felt like it stretched less than this. I mean, because it's stiffer, I think there's just less tendency to stretch. Now, it's still going to stretch some, but it's just not as easy to stretch as the piece that has not been pre-starched, and this is the piece that hasn't pre-starched. I marked that with an X. Now, the next reason, I've lost track of what number we're on, but the next reason I like to pre-starch is because there's less fraying. Now, there still is some fraying. You can see a little bit right here. But this block has quite a bit more fraying. And I cut them both this morning and handled them the same. But you can see there's more fraying here than there is on this block. Now, all of those tips, those 8 tips that I just talked about, I think that was 8, possibly 9 tips, all helped facilitate the precision in my piecing. Now, this piece, I haven't trimmed down either piece, but this one looks like it's been trimmed. It's just so accurate. Every point meets up. This one, I don't know if it was in the cutting or what happened. It could be the way I sewed it, but this piece is not near as precise as this piece. And this piece is going to have to be trimmed down. The backs look nicer. There's less fraying on the back to have to worry about color showing through. Pre-starching helped improve my piecing. I know it did, because on the quilt behind me, every point matched up. I didn't have to rip out anything, and I didn't have to try to finagle any seams to make the points come out. I simply used the 1/4 of an inch foot on my machine, and they turned out perfect. Now, before I started all this, I looked into pre-starching and why people starched and what it did to the fabric. And there are 3 additional reasons why you do want to pre-starch, or why pre-starching can help you with quilting. Number 1, it helps your fabric stay pressed, or the appearance of being pressed, longer, simply because it makes the fabric stiffer and crisper. Another reason is that all that starch on your fabric helps resist staining. And the reason it helps resist staining is because the starch coats and kind of seals the fiber of the fabric, so it protects them. So the last reason is that stains wash out more easily. So when you wash your quilt or you wash your fabric, if it does have a stain and you did pre-starch, a lot of the stain is going to be on the starch and not your fabric. So a lot of it's going to wash out. So that stain, a lot of it will go away when you wash it out, because it's on the starch and not the fibers of your fabric. I'm convinced. I'm finally convinced that pre-starching is going to help me with quilting, because I really do like for my points to meet. I like to have accurate piecing, and it's been a struggle for me for years. I've been quilting for 30 years, and it's just started getting better in the past 3 years as I've been doing my channel, because I've been sewing a lot more. So I just think it's made a huge difference in my quilting. And like you can see how these points all came out so nice, and it was so much fun. It really cut down on the frustration. I didn't have to trim my blocks hardly any when I made this quilt. The only thing I really did, it did, even with the starch, it will fray a little bit, so I did have to trim a lot of that off, because I do like those neat little blocks. But I was just trimming little pieces of fabric, not the little strings of the fabric, not cutting down the whole block. So I'm sold on that. If you're enjoying this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't. Please share with a friend. Always leave a comment. In the comments below, I would like you to tell me if you've pre-starched or not, if you've considered it and why you haven't, and if you think you might try it if you haven't before. So until next time, have fun quilting.